Hi, my name is Marco. I created a community where I helped over 100 people through their psychological struggle and created a transformational shift in their consciousness. I've done this through my own shift in experience that then gave me the motivation to help others through these existential problems and confusions. And there's something that is absolutely universal and uncontestedly common by everyone. Without exception, the relationship to your unhappiness in life is proportional to how much you run away from the truth. And some of you watching this, or actually a lot of you watching this, have already had an awakening experience. You've seen through the ego, you touched the void, and you felt the oneness, whatever you want to call it. And somehow you still feel unhappy. Maybe even more so than before, because now the ground got swept under your feet, and you just wonder, is truth supposed to be like this, where you just feel so disoriented from life? But that's not how truth is supposed to feel like. That's because there's layers to what truth is. And this will sound harsh because it might sound like I'm blaming you for being unhappy or depressed or anxious or unsatisfied with your life. But believe me that this comes from a place of empathy. I promise you that at the end of this video, you'll have a deeper understanding on what it means for you to be running away from the truth and why this is making you dislike your life. Truth is the most powerful word in the human language. Nothing else comes close to it. There's nothing that means more than what the word truth means. And truth is synonymous with a bunch of things. So I think it's important we try to define it as best as we can, as all-encompassing as this word might be. But truth is synonymous with what is real. Truth is existence. Truth is being. And truth is, at its core, simply what is. But truth is also your face hitting the ground floor in the pain that you feel afterwards from your face being split in half. That's why truth is also the same as awareness. The desire to figure out what is true comes from your true identity that wants to find itself. It's the desire to understand what you really are and what you're really made out of. The fact that you're watching this tells me that you sincerely care about the truth, because if not, you wouldn't have clicked on a video titled this way. You likely feel like you really want it, as I also felt like I really wanted it too. Because for me, there really was nothing that I cared more about than finding out what is true, the nature of reality. It's what I obsessed forever about through philosophy and psychology. The issue is that it is very hard to find other people who have this same love for truth. In modern times, the word has also been kind of corrupted. It has stopped meaning anything because charlatans and scammers and just the president of the United States of America have used this word to corrupt it to its core, to flip it on its head and mean lies and delusion instead. So now we kind of stop believing that it matters or has any real significance. And yet we also care a lot about being right. Everybody is always defending their opinion and trying to posture themselves as being close in contact with truth and therefore being above other people. We care a lot about appearing aligned with our true selves. Most people struggle a lot to admit when they are wrong. And why do you think that is? Truth is not just about objective reality. Truth is about your relationship to reality. And if I catch you in a lie, you are showing to me that you live in delusion. And nobody wants to admit to themselves that they're lying to themselves. It's not a pleasant thing to realize. And if you are one of those few that likes to discover yourself in a lie, then this entire field of spiritual and psychological development is really where you'll find yourself and where you'll find your place. But before that, I've got bad news for you, because all the mind does is lie to itself. The voice in your head that narrates your life, that is trying to figure out the truth of things, by default its nature is delusional. It does not care about objective reality. It creates its own reality. And it does so because it just wants to survive. Beyond just biological and physical survival, the voice in your head is trying to survive. It represents patterns in your brain that have repeated themselves often enough so that they found a groove. And now if they figure out that they're just a groove and not actually solid, then they can dissolve. And that's very scary. And no thought really wants that. And that's why thinking comes so automatic to us, so easy. The act of thinking is, in most cases, if you pay attention to it, like dreaming. You dream about possible futures that give you anxiety, and then you're like in this fantasy world thinking about it when it's not real at all. You ponder about past regrets, and they make you feel ashamed. And then you conjure up philosophies in your head to make life feel meaningful. And what you actually feel is a sense of void that you cannot do anything with. We do this so we can avoid the truth that stares us directly in the face. We start to feel that we can actually do something about it if we just think hard enough. But if we can actually do something about it and actually come in contact to what is true about our thoughts, then suddenly we are responsible for our lives. Suddenly, there's something that must change. Society, if you have noticed, doesn't want to be responsible for anything. It's always other people that are to blame. It's so much easier. Because if those in power are to blame, then what a difficult fight to win. And what if you are actually in power and you've been fighting yourself all the time? That's a very difficult fight to win. Because for each of us, the truth is always connected to a feeling we don't want to feel. So we've hidden what's true deep in our minds, in our subconscious, like a barrier that is being quarantined, or like boiling water you don't want to spill over. But the moment you see what the truth is, you also see what must be done. And then the pain really starts because you cannot stop it anymore. When truth is being seen and the defense mechanisms of trying to suppress it and hide it fail, then you're confronted with reality. And reality usually implies that you must act or you will suffer the consequences. That's the thing about reality. You cannot think yourself around it. You cannot manipulate or change it to your will. It is how it is. So now you have to confront what to do about it. For example, you might suddenly notice that you've been stuck in a relationship that you should have left a long, long time ago, but you still really don't want to leave. You've invested so much time in this person, so much time in building this life together, and now you see that it is actually harming you, or it has been harming you since forever. And oh my God, it is painful. It is so difficult, especially if you got abused or mistreated. Because if you got mistreated and you were made to feel powerless, and now you suddenly discover the truth that you actually have power, this means that you also have some sort of responsibility. This would imply that even in the abuse you received, you had a sense of agency and you didn't act upon it. And then this creates a ton of shame that gets hidden in the unconscious. This is not nice to discover. Or you've had a career that you've been working on for decades, but it made you miserable the entire time. And you didn't want to accept that it made you miserable. And you fear what a different life would look like. You can't even imagine living a different life than the life that you're living in this career. You feel like you've spent so much time on this, and now suddenly you realize it was just wasted, empty. So much effort for nothing. Maybe even to feel worse. Maybe you have done something horrible in your life, something to other people, but then you deny that this is what you did. And now this denial has created this monstrous mountain of coping mechanisms and lies that you tell yourself repeatedly for years. Because if you'd actually admit that you did what you did and that it means what it means, then what will you feel then? How will you be able to live with yourself then? Maybe you finally realize that all this money that you've been chasing your entire life isn't making you a tiny bit happier, and that you've poured decades into a life of empty hustle. You're now moving towards your 40s or 50s, and you've dismissed your family, you've dismissed your kids, you've dismissed your entire life for this idea that money would give you happiness and that money would fulfill you. And now you see it's all an empty hustle and you sacrifice so much for nothing. Try to accept this truth. It's very hard. And there are so many truths that the average person does not acknowledge. And I've been doing this work for 2 years now, and I've seen all the examples above and more. But often, and that's what I find so sad about it, it's in the little things, right? People uncover these truths about themselves in little steps. And they might not seem so grandiose, or they often aren't that grandiose. Like, for example, you would love to get more attention, but you can't admit to yourself that you would want that. So you then construct a personality around not caring so much about what other people think. And then you've isolated yourself and play up this character of being too cool for school. And then 5 years passed, and suddenly you are confronted by the shame of being deeply insecure and really wanting to have a friend that agrees with you or has the same vision that you have. There are slight lies that you can tell yourself about that compound into your entire personality. And then you notice this and your entire personality unravels. And often there are like thousands of those little lies that you have to uncover through deep personal work. This stuff breaks people. But this breaking, despite it not feeling this way, is healthy. It frees you and it builds you into what you've always been looking for when you were looking for truth. But Marco, you might say, what if the truth makes you worse? What if truth isn't a happy place at all? This question comes from the deepest level of lies that we tell each other as people. And that lie is the idea that your identity, the entire story of your life, what you think you are and who you are, is not real at all. That it is constructed in your head. Because the part of you that fears that truth might make you unhappy is protecting you from discovering the truth that would dissolve yourself. Awakening in spirituality is the concept of waking up from the dream of your life. It is losing this attachment to thought in your mind or this narrative you have in your head as the truth and realizing that the brain makes it all up. Awakening in spirituality is the concept of waking up from the dream that is your life, which often makes multiple truths you are running away from just flush into your head. And then you're flooded with emotions. The sense of spirituality is often just a transformation of your identity. And then this actually changes your consciousness. When people talk about higher levels of consciousness, it is a deeper dissolution of your identity into reality. And it actually changes how you experience your life, how you experience itself. You start to feel more peaceful, more content, accepting what you are without having to fix yourself. A few days ago, I uploaded a video called Philosophical Thinking is Mental Poison. Check this out if you haven't seen it, because it ties into what we're talking about here. Because it is philosophical thought that hijacks this search for truth and makes it about external reality instead of about your psyche. So you try to cure your emotional wounds, your traumas, your negative experiences, your resentment towards life and reality. And you use philosophy to patch these things up. For me, philosophy helped me after I lost my faith in Christianity. It helped me to understand the validity of science and to care for logical thought. It showed me how we make assumptions and take knowledge as something obvious when, yeah, it's much more fluid or based on assumptions than truth. But also through the ideas like nihilism, this idea that nothing really matters, philosophy simply validates the existential pain in a way that a lot of people get stuck there forever. And I was stuck there for a big portion of my life. Because when you think you found truth in some philosophical view, then you become stuck there, because now going back to an older view will always feel like regress. It will always feel like you're walking back from truth. And often when you find something that rings true to you, it is normal to cling to it and hold on to it. That's why people cling to ideologies and belief systems so much. Because every time we feel like we come closer to what is true, we have to build walls around our dismissed options. I thought Christianity was the one true religion. Then I became an atheist, and it blocked everything off that was related to Christianity. For a long time, I couldn't even consider anything about Christianity as possibly true whatsoever. And in that way, I might also have lost a part of the puzzle, right? I basically say that there's no valuable wisdom in the entirety of the thing now, because my associations with Christianity were so negative. It made me miserable. It didn't make me happy at all. But then there are deep philosophical questions like, what if God does exist, but in some other form than what Christianity says? Well, now the concept of God had a negative association in my mind. That might now put the idea of God into a box of negativity, and this happens to a lot of very intellectual people. So it doesn't really get entertained. There's just an absolute certainty that God could never be real because of the associations that have been drawn. So now it's more difficult to access what, God could actually mean in some real way. And the part has blocked off this aspect of truth. It's precisely this difficulty to change the way we relate to our ideas that make us feel like we want to find out what's true, but then also get frustrated by how it feels like impossible to truly access, because you always can change your mind. And then by changing your mind, your new form of seeing things kind of become true in your perception. But here's the thing. You've likely had moments where you've touched something real, maybe on mushrooms, maybe in meditation, maybe a moment of total presence, or where you felt love. You know that there's something there that feels transcendent in some form, some sort of beyond that feels so direct and immediate that the distinction between it and truth ceases. The only problem is that you keep leaving this state, and then you can't figure out how to stay in the state. And then you're forever chasing this high, this desire to be in this state of absolute truth or comfort or peace forever. And then it's being chased by philosophical thought, by hedonism, by drugs, by women. But what actually happens, if you're a real philosopher, you deconstruct all your beliefs, you deconstruct all of your false assumptions, all your ideologies and your biases. And then you do access the nature of truth itself permanently. It becomes part of your experience beyond just thinking. And it's the peace that all spirituality is always pointing towards. And then if you do it right, you sooner or later end up at the realization that there is no self, and that all mental chatter is illusion, and all you are is this endless sea of perceptions that without restriction or force is actually quite pleasant. Often what it takes is catching yourself in one lie you've been telling yourself, and then the entire house breaks down and you go to a deeper layer of realization and awakening, and it feels like a deeper contact with truth. And it becomes very evident that this is the case because you start to feel more like yourself. You start to feel more at peace with the whole of existence. It just takes a while to get there, and sometimes the only way up is to go down. And yeah, you have to go down before you can go up. You need to see what is uncomfortable for you to see the truth. If it wasn't uncomfortable at first, you would already know. This is what self-development looks like. This is what it means. It's to see not just that the world is evil, but there's a part of you that you have deemed as evil too. And you don't want to see it. You want to moralize and virtue signal. We want to look good in front of other people and not expose our flaws. And in the same way, we don't want to expose the flaws to ourselves. So we can elevate our own self-image and not investigate all the ways we are narcissistic and selfish. On the highest layer of reality, truth is just what is. And what is cannot be argued with. It can't be changed or transformed. It can't be negotiated around, despite how desperately the mind tries to change it. When your head hits the pavement floor, truth expresses itself in its ruthless, uncompromising reality. Every moment you feel dissatisfied with reality, dissatisfied with your life or experience or existence, is you fighting the truth. It's fighting what something is like. In the present moment, there are no other options than what something is like. What this requires is something in your mind that wants to divide and conquer reality, fight and control it. You want to go to war against reality and manipulate it for your own benefit. You want to destroy death and sadness and poverty and fear as if they don't exist. And on some level, you can influence reality, right? That's the power and the beauty of our freedom. You can make this world a better place. But you won't defeat evil. You won't defeat death. You won't change that everything disappears over time. And you won't escape yourself. It's not possible to escape yourself. What you are and who you have become, accepting that and seeing that exactly for how it is coming in contact with the truth. When you don't try to change it, when you don't try to manipulate it, when you see it exactly for how it is, then you dissolve into life. You dissolve into the ocean of awareness. And in this sense, you start to understand that, yeah, there is no self. The distinction between self and other ceases. That's why on one breath I can say that, yeah, there truly is no self. And I can also say, you won't escape the self. Because in the dissolution process, you see what is just the truth. And the truth is beingness. There's nothing to argue against. And for all intents of purposes, then you can say this is the self or whatever, but it's not something solid. This is what the search for truth is after. The dissolution of the self. And it's scary. But it's also the most freeing, liberating, and inspiring thing in personal development. I write about this in my Substack, where I go into structured depth about how to achieve this sort of personal development. But the truth is also liberating. It's a feeling of freedom once accepted. Because once you accept what is true, you're not fighting reality anymore. You can actually make choices from a place of clarity, because there's no work being done maintaining this false identity that is just not real. When you acknowledge shame and anger and sadness, and you know the process that you need to do to integrate these experiences and these feelings, then you become so much happier, so much freer. When you stop fighting who you were or who you have become or what you want to do, then you really are in alignment with truth. And you'll find whatever happiness you are seeking is not in question anymore. The final definition of truth is truth as love. Love has the quality of not being questioned. When you love somebody, there's nothing to argue against. You just feel drawn to it, the same way you feel drawn to the truth. It is not a coincidence that you feel drawn to truth, because underneath all the pain, underneath all the suffering, you do find an ocean of love. And it's not this conceptual love. It is the desire to be one with what is. And true love is not questioned. If you love this video, then I really recommend you check this video out next.